listening. We are just about ready to get started. All right, and I think we are ready. Thanks everyone for joining us. We're very excited to share with you sort of a 360-degree view of UCEAP's new Navigating Reentry course, including the collaboration that it took to create it and how UC returnees can benefit from this reentry course. While we're presenting, we're going to turn off our cameras and we'll turn them back on when we are at the end to preserve bandwidth and also preserve focus on our slides. So we'll go ahead and do that and then we'll get started. Okay, what we're going to talk about today real quick. First, introductions and roles of the presenters, and then we'll go into project context and background. We'll talk more about collaborative development and provide some examples, and then we'll delve into what is in the course and why, provide some samples of course material, and then we've each chosen some takeaways that we want to share with all of you before the end of the session. So we're going to start first with introductions, and I'm going to hand things over to Mark.
Thank you, Carrie. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm Mark Byrne. I'm the Global Risk Manager in the Study Abroad Center and Office of Global Engagement at UC Irvine. So I work with students and faculty and staff who are working with students to prepare them for their activities overseas, to provide them a high level of support while they're studying abroad or researching or interning abroad, and then to help welcome them back to campus. I remember myself as a study abroad student thinking about reentry when I've started getting emails that it was time to register for courses for the next fall while I was still starting or still in the middle of my semester courses while I was studying abroad. That ticked off for me the reminder that, oh, I was going to be going home soon and I needed to start thinking about it. So it's been great to participate in this project to create this resource for UC students. And I will turn this over to my colleague, Maya.
Hi, folks. Thanks for having us today. Thanks for being here. I am a career counselor of over 10 years. My name is Maya. I'm Assistant Director of Graduate Career Education. And in those 10 years, I've supported all types of students. I've even done reentry workshops with our UCSB EAP office focused on resumes. But unfortunately, as you may know, those workshops were often poorly attended and we couldn't really go into great depth. So I jumped at the chance to be part of a course, this process to learn about instructional development for my own self. I decided to leave that to Carrie because she's so good at it and I'm not. But I also see the benefit to having a really structured course to help students process what they learned in study abroad and really have a chance to explore those stories and the transferable skills that they develop while they are studying abroad. And now I can be a better career counselor if they've gone through this course. I'll pass it on to Carrie.
Thanks, Maya. Hi, everybody. I'm Carrie Kapp. I design learning experiences at UCEAP for our students and staff. And my background is as a professor in higher education, where I taught visual media, design theory, and technology courses. And as part of that, I helped designers build and present their first portfolios, and I often worked with career centers. I noticed that the practical elements of resumes and bios and portfolios were often absent in the curriculum. And so I appreciated that relationship a lot. And I also studied abroad for a semester. I experienced major changes of direction and sort of a sense of isolation when I got back. And I definitely would have benefited from a project like the one we're going to present to you today. So I'm going to hand things over to Yena.
Hello, everyone. Thanks, Carrie. I'm Yena Lamb, and I am a research analyst and work with data here at UCAP. And I studied abroad as a Bruin, and I also would have benefited from a course like this. And I think that formative study abroad experience really planted the seed for my international ed research interests as a gaucho later on, and ultimately my work here at UCEAP. I'm just so glad to see so many of you and gather with you today to talk about this new Navigating Reentry course. So we're going to start with some of the background and context about this project, beginning with UCEAP's Strategic Goal 3. So Strategic Goal 3, or SG3 is short, is really the origins of this UC-wide project that we're discussing today. And SG3 is one of the goals of UCEAP strategic plan. So a committee was formed under the strategic goal as a cross-functional team of UCEAP staff to collaborate and propose strategies that integrate student learning outcomes throughout the students' program experiences. And this committee is also charged with recommending initiatives to integrate learning into the abroad experiences in pre-departure, during the abroad phase, and in reentry. So you might be wondering, why did we start with reentry first? So part of why SG3 recommended reentry as the first initiative was really based on data from program participants. So UCEAP students reported in the participant program evaluation that they were least likely to have made substantial gains in clarifying their academic goals or their postgraduate plans after studying abroad. So we know that students are seeing a gap in their ability to connect study abroad with their learning and professional path and growth. And then in our fall 21-22 marketing survey, more than half of our returnees would have appreciated a little more guidance on unpacking their experience abroad, and a little less than half would have wanted some resume or professional development support. So then as a response to all of that data, the SG3 committee designed learning outcomes for the reentry phase that involve cultural learning. It involved connecting the experience to their learning path, and then finally to applications to personal and professional contexts. And now I'm going to hand things off to Mark.
All right, everyone, I'm going to give you a little history lesson in the next 2 minutes. So the scholarship on what we call today reentry goes back about 100 years to the 1920s with the concept that was called the marginal man. This was presented by sociologists as an individual caught between two cultural realities who was having difficulties establishing their own identity in that reality, in that in-between space. Other scholars went on to visualize this struggle not as a person, but as a process, with the U curve, which you see on the screen right now, that starts, it's very familiar to many of us, it starts upon arrival with a sense of euphoria. It's followed by a dramatic drop as the realities of life abroad collide with its romantic allure, and the student or the traveler rebounds with an embrace of the host culture. This U turned into a W when scholars plotted a similar set of challenges, albeit unexpected, for the return home. And they borrowed language from the trauma that was experienced during the First World War a generation earlier in their studies on culture shock and reverse culture shock, which emphasized the psychological challenges and the alienation experienced by making a temporary home abroad and then returning. So if you happen to facilitate your own reentry programming, you'll likely know of Margaret Push's 1997 concept of the reentry worm. I think there can be another 10 signs of reverse culture shock, and then the reentry worm is the next image that should come up. This is a visual that provides students with a wiggly path of emotional responses that lead to culture shock on the return home. And it's presented as both the validation and a normalization of these emotions. But there's some who critique this model, saying that it's overgeneralized, it assumes a particular positionality of the student. Even the word shock, whether it's culture shock or reverse culture shock, as applied to another culture, has derogatory overtones. So the new Navigating Your Reentry course provides a series of interventions in this second curve of the W that initially validate the student experience and then quickly pivots to engage the student with exercises to chart their own pathway forward. Next slide, please. And I want to say that today we are firmly rooted in the pathways era of higher education. Legislators, families, students demand transparency in the outcomes of a college degree. Education abroad has found a home alongside other high-impact offerings, such as service learning, undergraduate research, and career services. And all of these offer learning opportunities with self-reflection. The research demonstrates that study abroad can be a powerful experiential learning process when students are provided the opportunity to reflect and distill meaning from their time abroad. In other words, the post-experience reflection is critical to the learning process, and this reentry course provides that opportunity to make substantial gains in their learning abroad. Research on reentry programming also shows that it is as important as pre-departure programming, although learning outcomes for reentry often focus on intercultural competencies and less so on practical learning and their applications. So this gives us an opportunity to leverage the potential impact of reentry programming on the students' personal and professional learning goals and their path, while making a contribution to the larger scholarship and research on reentry, the reentry experience. We know from other scholarship that academic and career integration is a commonly cited goal of reentry programming, but there's little to no data to support those outcomes. This leaves us a great deal of space and opportunity to develop programming to facilitate and intervene in the learning process for students after they finish their education abroad program, and also to collect valuable data and learn how we can integrate the classroom and the experiential learning with professional and personal coaching. And with that, I'm going to turn this over to my colleague, Maya.
As you've heard and as you will hear, self-reflection is an important piece of the reentry course. As a career counselor, I also know that self-reflection is an important piece of the career development cycle. But I know through experience and through research that it's often a step that is skipped or overlooked because it can be difficult to do, it can be ambiguous, it can be time-consuming. However, knowing oneself, learning from our successes and failures can lead to great understanding and decisions made about the future. Taking the time to self-reflect, whether it's on one's own, alongside a career counselor, or through a course like this one, may help a student relieve anxieties about their major, their future, their first job, life post-graduation, and all the other topics that came up as concerns from subject matter experts that students are facing. So you can see in this list, these are some of the things that folks could reflect on and that they will reflect on during the course. I also want to say that reflection requires courage. It's thoughtful and deliberate. And when self-reflection is part of an activity, asking specific questions or pointing out situations one may encountered, the process is done without even thinking too hard. Once someone gets comfortable thinking about how or why they did things, reflection may become second nature. Next slide, please. Part of my job as a career counselor is to make sure that students are doing their best to encourage folks to hire them. And so this is a list of 8 competencies put out by NACE, which is the National Association of Colleges and Employers. And you can see of these 8 competencies, I would guarantee that many, if not all of them, would be brought about during the study abroad process. And as you can see, self-development, of which I consider reflection to be a big piece in the bottom right corner, is also listed here. You can imagine that employers want to hire folks who understand themselves, their needs, their skills, their values, interests, learning styles, etc. I'm imagining part of this self-development is also a level of confidence. Study abroad is definitely a way students can build these competencies to make them competitive for their next steps. And notice I didn't say for their entire career. We want to take the pressure off of them figuring out what their career is for the next 40 years, because that's just not how the world is working anymore. We want confident, qualified students applying for jobs. Next slide.
Thanks, Maya. So that was a great setup for the question, why reentry? And I want to add to that, in the Strategic Goal 3 committee, we really spent a lot of time examining who are our learners? What are they really experiencing in reentry? And why is that important for the content we develop? What skills, knowledge, attitudes, or behaviors do we want them to gain? And how does that measure up to what they tell us they feel like they're missing? How do those things align? So we developed several different learner personas. And from these personas, we developed questions and determined that the course needed to do a certain amount of things based on these quotes that you see on the screen, which is a lot of different personas, a lot of different perspectives, demographics. We determined the course needed to normalize and validate the reacclimation emotions and provide resources for more in-depth mental and emotional health support on campuses. It needed to demonstrate the value of unpacking and not just say how to do it, but why. It needed to provide professional development tools and techniques and examples and guidance specific to this very niche study abroad reentry experience. And I say niche because, something like LinkedIn Learning has a ton of career guidance. You can find out how to make a resume out of it. But there's nothing really customized to a study abroad experience or a reentry experience. We also determined we needed to be honest about what a course like this, online, self-paced, what is it good for, what is it not as good for, and who is it accessible to? And this type of guidance would be most impactful for these target demographics that we're working with, who are our UC program participants. And in order to create content like this, we really needed broader involvement than a single UCEAP committee. So that brings us to our collaborative development section. And I want to preface this with sharing a common pitfall of designing learning experiences is always focusing on either what the designer thinks should happen or building what a steering committee or an industry thinks something should look like, instead of really focusing on the actual learner who will be engaging with the experience. And so that's another reason why, as a best practice, the Strategic Goal 3 took a step back when it was time to develop the course. We invited lots of other voices and perspectives to contribute. And we did this in two main ways: by assembling a multi-campus steering committee and by involving dozens of subject matter experts early on. So I'm going to pass this on to Mark.
Thanks again, Carrie. So Carrie said to ensure that the reentry course addressed and responded to the diverse needs and perspectives of UC students, regardless of time, duration, location of their program abroad, and to ensure that the course showcased the multitude of resources available, EAP ascended a team to shape and inform the content and delivery of the course. And Carrie used a multimodal platform to solicit input from us and give us ways to provide feedback from individuals who work directly and indirectly with education abroad across the UC system. So these committee members represent EAP operations, campus study abroad offices, counseling centers, career services folks, risk management, recent study abroad alumni, and more. We met regularly over the last year, and I want to say these amazing folks collectively charted the course of the ship with Carrie as our captain. I want to end this by saying that everyone on this list brought their own experiences and their own emotions to the course. We were all reliving our own reentry experiences as we crafted the content of the course and shaped the design of it. So it was a really personal and professionally rewarding experience. I'll turn this over to Maya.
Thanks, Mark. So in addition to the steering committee, I guess prior to the steering committee starting, there were half-hour interviews conducted of all these subject matter experts, or SMEs as they're called, that I needed to learn. Just to make sure that we had a really strong holistic view of what a student goes through upon reentry, and also to just validate what the steering committee experts also were saying. So each provided context through a half-hour interview, and they really understand what the student needs. Again, like Carrie mentioned, so that we don't lose focus of the course, because again, this is about the student and it's not about us as the folks who are perceiving what the student needs. We need to hear from the real students and from the real experts who are meeting with students on a day-to-day basis. Next slide, Carrie.
Thanks, Maya. So collaborating on a course like this takes a lot of work and organization. If anyone attended Kate's wonderful health and safety course presentation, she did address workflow a little bit, and I will too very briefly. We use an agile instructional design workflow, which really prioritizes working in phases and quickly prototyping and then testing over and over again. And this helps a committee like this efficiently adapt and respond to change based on that testing feedback from the demographics who will be engaging with the product. So the types of activities that took place phase by phase, this is really the interesting part of the workflow, I think. We always start out with a needs analysis, which is basically gathering, analyzing feedback, and discovering what it is that we need to move forward, conducting subject matter expert interviews, and assembling a steering committee. And from there, really things speed up. You can determine topics, formats, timeline. You start storyboarding and scripting, working with media, and building prototypes and beta testing. And finally, working on a course transcript, which is a companion to any online course, fine-tuning interactions based on beta testing, and implementing accessibility features happen towards the end of the workflow. And for our specific development timeline, a project like this is not a quick turnaround, although props to the steering committee, they collaborated to meet an exceptionally quick turnaround of about 13 months. So we started June 2022 and launched in our learning management system July 2023, meeting every other week for brainstorms and discussion, slide demos, and beta test planning. And some members joined and departed halfway through development, so there was a bit of turnover. Together, we initiated 3 phases of beta testing. You can see those little sticky notes kind of in between December and May. And at one point towards the end, we broke into smaller subgroups to work on a massive course transcript for phase 3 testing, which was very rewarding and productive for all of us to break into smaller teams and really have that increased focus on specific parts of the course. So next up, we're going to delve into what types of topics and activities actually made it into the course, and how do they tie to all this data and the outcomes that we've been discussing. So we're going to take turns with different topics and slides in this section, and I'm going to kick it off with kind of a bird's eye view of the modules and the underlying rationale of why it's organized this way. So there are 5 modules, and we're going to start with module 1, which the committee has kind of affectionately referred to as the zoom out module, zooming out. So really big topics. Why can reacclimating be so challenging? This is validated by real returnee quotes and stories, and also with perspectives and broad coping skill guidance from campus mental health professionals. And these foundational concepts and feelings, and even dispelling misconceptions, are essential to address up front, because when we increase that understanding, we're creating a sense of belonging. There are others like me. I'm okay. Maybe this course can help me move forward. And that helps increase intrinsic motivation for students and alums to continue through the course and to be encouraged to reflect on the experience. So if module 1's the zoom out, module 2 is the zoom in. So learners connect those high-level concepts and those misconceptions to their own personal experiences in this module. Critical reflection and unpacking are introduced, and there's the first unpacking activity. Modules 3 and 4 have a clear professional development slant with a focus on applying what's been learned so far. So identify the skills, structure stories, communicate with different types of audiences. What does networking mean for study abroad? How do you incorporate study abroad in a resume? These tend to be topics that returnees are already very eager to know. And finally, Module 5 applies all of the concepts and practical application looking forward. So helping learners reflect and connect concepts and course discoveries to their future goals. And the course provides printable checklists and text entry activities. And so students can have lasting documentation of all of their unpacking. Mark.
So one of the ways that we, within the first module, the psychology of reentry, one of the ways that we make space for students to engage in reentry is both a physical and a psychological process, not just a single event, is by providing them in this section with a series of texts narrated by different members of the steering committee and our subject matter experts. By clicking on each of these buttons, students will hear narration, explanations of the many reasons how and why reentry can be challenging, isolating, even alienating. And one of the goals here is to connect students with these explanations that resonate with them and validate their emotions and feelings throughout the reentry process. They include a discussion of what we know about belonging in the world and creating a sense of home wherever we are, the benefits and drawbacks of comparing experiences and cultures with our peers wherever we are, how to sync aspects of the student's home culture and host culture together to build a bridge between those experiences abroad and where the student is now. And I think we're going to hear a live section of this.
Yes. Are you ready?
I'm ready, yes.
So many people call so many places home in this world. That doesn't necessarily mean having physical homes in multiple countries. More like feeling strong connections or a sense of belonging to multiple places. Feeling nostalgia, or even feeling pulled between different places that represent home in different ways. It's common and completely valid for returnees to question the concept of home and the sense of belonging that comes with it. It can also be uncomfortable. Exploring ideas of home and belonging after an experience abroad can enhance empathy with others from different backgrounds.
All right, thanks, Carrie. Next slide, please. This section validates students' experiences and emotions, gives them a variety of entry points to engage their reentry journey, and it sets them up for the several tasks or exercises they'll do later that channel their energies productively as they process their time abroad. It's kind of like an ASMR section, guiding them in, making space for them, doing a quick temperature check, and setting the tone for them to really get to work in the sections to come. I'll turn this over to Maya, I believe.
Thanks, Mark. It's me.
Yena, sorry.
So the module that Mark just addressed was about zooming out to look at the range of returnee emotions and thought processes. And the second module really helps the learner zoom in into their own personal experiences studying abroad. And it allows them to reflect on what they've gained from both positive and challenging experiences abroad. So one of the early activities in this module is thinking about this question. So how was studying abroad? Something that returnees probably hear all the time, but they could have trouble answering, partly because the question could lead to topics that they haven't yet reflected on. And they're probably talking to an audience that they haven't yet kind of tailored their response to. So what I especially like in this module is what's called the navigator. And it's one of the interactions that prompts students to begin reflecting on their experience in some really accessible ways. So the learner clicks on the icons that you see in the orange, and they see these prompts that they can use to in the space below to type in their responses. And that box is a private space to jot down their thoughts, and that they can print or save for later. It's just a documentation of that reflection process. And this activity can give ideas for topics to think about. So if they click on ideas, then they get this pop-up, and they see topics like friendships, family structures, cultural norms, their identities, their courses, academic culture, their internship or research projects. And that kind of allows them to, just to think about the topics, and it helps generate more thoughts. And some key takeaways from this section is that reflection really helps personal and professional growth, and that process can start with a few non-threatening questions. And that this process prepares the learner for the upcoming modules on applying study abroad to their career pathways and their professional contexts. And I'm going to hand it off to Maya.
Thanks, Tina. As you can imagine, as a career counselor, recruiters are part of our population that we deal with a lot. And so I often put students in the mindset of a recruiter so that they can kind of see where that person's coming from. And that's one of my favorite parts of this module too, is a chance for a student to see a cover or to see a job description and a cover letter through the lens of a recruiter. And as you can see what's happening, we showed the process of reviewing a job description in great depth and then showed cover letters from 2 different applicants. We can see the recruiter's lens from who they would choose to interview and why, with a focus on how the candidate shared their study abroad experience. So again, I really love this because everything, the UC system tends to be very theoretical and conceptual, and this is a very great way to apply all the information that the students have been learning and what they've been reflecting on. As a career counselor, I often ask a student to do this, and so it's nice that we have it kind of in writing here. And it helps the student make the connection that they really need to show their skills that match the job description so that a recruiter can clearly see them in the job, not see them in a variety of experiences and have to think and make the connection themselves. I always tell students, we don't want anyone to have to think when they're reading your resume or cover letter. So you can see here, we would choose who to interview because of how they really showed off those transferable skills and related to the position using their study abroad experience, which I think a lot of students don't think about as being a really wonderful transferable career professional experience.
Thanks, Maya. All right, I'm excited to give a quick tour of the Reentry Toolkit slide. And the slide is a consolidation of reentry related links to both UCEAP and UC campus specific resources. The cool thing about this slide is each campus has a specific version of this slide that links directly to the resources on their campus. So students self-select their campus and they're routed to their particular campus specific toolkit. Let's walk through each section and quickly explore. Connect with UCEAP provides direct links to the internship and research awards that returnees can apply for if they have conducted one of those experiences. To join the UCEAP Alumni Association, to share a story, and to pursue studying abroad again. And yes, campus study abroad advisors, the advice, if you click on this, does involve that conversation with you. Absolutely. Connect with your peers. These are really ways to help increase a sense of belonging for returnees and also giving back. So links to campus reentry events, if they exist, social media channels that students and alums can choose to follow to stay in tune with their peers, campus ambassador or peer advisor opportunities. For Connect on Campus, these are the direct links to things like Career Center, mental health. There's information on respectfully leveraging faculty office hours, which includes making appointments, and more global opportunities like Fulbrights or other funding that can take you abroad again. And finally, alumni will take this course. And so alumni have their own section here where the UC alumni wide network is linked as well as a campus specific, any campus specific options. There's also the direct link to the alumni page of each campus career services site because each campus provides a certain amount of time of free services to alums, and they often don't know that. So we want to highlight that free access. And finally, community-based mental health resources, since these are things that alums don't necessarily have access to, but there are a lot of community options. So the great thing about this reentry toolkit slide is that returnees often don't know what to look for or where, and here it is all in one place for them to launch in different tabs, bookmark, or even, join that alumni association and follow that social media channel. Yena.
Thanks, Carrie. I love that slide. So one of the things that we learned from the survey feedback was that after completing the modules, over 90% of our beta testers felt more confident in the 3 learning outcome areas that SG3, that committee defined. So that was in analyzing and describing cultural learning situations. It is in describing the impact of studying abroad on their personal professional learning path. And it's also in articulating those impacts in different communication contexts like resumes, cover letters, or interviews. And then from the beta testers' narrative feedback on the reflection topic, some beta testers have responded really well to the text entry interactions and the navigator writing activity in particular.
Sorry,
And
5 minutes left.
Thank you. And then Mark, if you want to talk about the next narrative feedback section. So then in this section, the narrative feedback was really about the validation of the prompt and the reentry reflection. Students were talking about how they felt really validated in their feelings and experiences and in their increased sense of belonging and diminishing isolation.
And you can see here that a lot of the activities did help students really understand that the study abroad experience could be described in a professional way, and that they could be really proud of those transferable skills that they developed.
And also you'll see in the top left, I loved how the toolkit catered to my university, which we've gotten a lot of great feedback on that toolkit, and some more feedback that relate to that toolkit. Throughout the course, we've really emphasized connecting to various campus resources. So we tracked through survey questions before and after. What are returnees doing when they get back? And then what are they more likely to do after a result of interacting with the reentry toolkit slide? And some of the most impressive results were we found that testers were more likely to want to meet with a campus career advisor or their mental health office after interacting with that toolkit. So the course is really benefiting students in the way we intended to drive them to be more motivated to connect with campus resources. And we will continue tracking this type of information in our surveys. So here's the takeaway section. Each of us have picked a quick thing to talk about. I wanted to talk about setting expectations. So students who take this course, students and alums, their expectations are really set from the beginning. You can see formats, lengths, types of activities, navigation, but maybe almost more importantly, what is this course experience not designed to do? Well, it's not designed to replace anything, especially campus reentry resources and activities. It doesn't replace dialogue and feedback with your faculty, doesn't replace peer learning experiences, and it doesn't at all replace personal guidance from career advisors or mental health staff. So we really emphasize the value of campus resources throughout this entire course. Mark.
So thank you. One of the things that I love about this is because we know that students are open and available to learning interventions at different moments during their time with us on and off campus. This course allows the student to engage the reentry process at their own pace and their own time. It's completely self-proctored. It complements on-campus programming that we offer our returnees, and it primes them to have really thoughtful conversations with friends, family, and campus support staff. This really is monumental because this has the potential, if they're using this, to reduce those feelings of isolation or frustration. Secondly, it ensures a consistent and high-level reentry programming for all UC students, making our education abroad programming just as competitive with other opportunities offered throughout the United States and around the world. So it makes EAP more competitive.
And you may be asking, how can people access the course? Well, it is live in UCEAP's learning management system called UCEAP Learn. We'll put a link in the chat to bookmark it. Anyone with UC credentials can access the course anytime, and that includes all students, alums still connected to their UC accounts, staff, faculty, anyone with UC credentials. It's also available to people who in the UC system who didn't study through UCEAP, but did other UC study abroad programs. So it's appealing to everyone. And staff have the benefit of using it in courses or in programming because it does generate a custom certificate at the end, so that campuses can track the course and require it, and instruct students to snap a screenshot and upload it somewhere as proof.
So as next steps, we're just getting the word out and keeping the momentum going. There is a link that leads to the messaging that you can copy and paste directly into your existing emails or web page for the returnees, and that message is linked. That message that's linked is going to be continually updated with relevant student feedback quotes.
Thanks, Yana. So I know we have hit max time. I want to point out, if you would like to download our deck, if you had questions, we don't have time for questions, but there is a contact email in this deck, and you're welcome to email that, instructionaldesign@UCEAP, University of California.edu. And that concludes our presentation, everyone. Thank you so much for attending, and please do feel free to email if you had questions that we didn't have time to address. And I'm going to stop sharing, turn my camera back on just to say hello and goodbye. Thank you, everyone.